I knew something was wrong the moment the night went quiet, too quiet for a living farm. One crash at the front gate, then a silence so heavy it felt like the land stopped breathing. Rex, my K9, was already a silhouette in the doorway, hackles high, reading danger before I could. Headlights knifed through the dark, sweeping across the pasture as my cows shifted in a nervous wave. By the time I reached the porch, a calf cried out, and the smell of blood rode the wind. 3 shapes at my broken gate, a crowbar, a wallet dropped in panic. And tucked inside that wallet, a payment receipt from a place I'd been saying no to for months. Greenfield HOA, chaired by Clarissa Doyle. What they didn't expect was that I don't scare easy. Not with Rex at my side, a shotgun I pray I never need, and a sheriff who still believes the law means something. Before we dive in, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. The silence that night wasn't natural. On a farm, you grow accustomed to a certain rhythm, the low hum of crickets, the shuffle of cows in their pasture, the occasional hoot of an owl perched in the trees. But when that gate crashed and the noise vanished, it was like the earth itself had paused, waiting to see what would happen next. I had lived on that land my entire life, the soil holding the weight of 3 generations of blood and work. Every nail in the barn, every fence post hammered into the ground carried a piece of my father's and grandfather's hands. To hear it desecrated in the dead of night stirred something primal in me, fear wrapped tight with rage. Rex felt it too. His growl wasn't the playful kind I heard when strangers came to deliver hay, or when a neighbor stopped by with pie. This was deeper from his chest, vibrating like thunder. He lunged at the door before I even grabbed my boots. The glow of headlights swept across the fields like predators' eyes hunting. They weren't headlights meant for a visit. They were sweeping, darting aggressive, like someone searching for prey. I stepped out into the cold shotgun, cradled close. My fingers trembled, but my jaw set firm. I wasn't about to let them take what 3 generations had built. The gravel crunched beneath my boots as floodlights snapped on, flooding the yard with sharp white beams. And that's when I saw it. The gate, my gate, the one I'd built myself 2 summers back, was splintered into a grotesque angle. One hinge twisted off wood and steel scattered like broken bones. Beyond it, my cows crowded near the fence line, their eyes glowing in the harsh light, bodies pressed together in fear. But it wasn't just property damage that chilled me. On the ground near the twisted mess lay one of my calves, its leg torn open by a shard of metal, blood pooling into the dirt. The sound it made was enough to hollow me out, a high-pained cry that cut through the night like a knife. That's when I saw the men. 3 of them dressed in dark clothes that absorbed the light. One gripped a crowbar, fresh wood splinters still clinging to the steel. Another had his hood drawn low, his scarred cheek glinting under the floodlights. They weren't teenagers pulling a prank. They were here with purpose. Rex didn't hesitate. He bolted toward the nearest man with a precision only years of training could bring. His body low, his paws hammering the earth, eyes locked on the intruder. The man swore, stumbling back as Rex launched, teeth flashing. He went down hard, dropping something that clattered against the gravel. The other 2 froze, caught between fight and flight as I leveled the shotgun. The air cracked as I fired a warning shot skyward. The sound roared across the pasture, echoing back off the hills. Off my land, I shouted, my voice steadier than I felt. "You tell whoever sent you I don't scare." The 2 bolted for the SUV idling just beyond the gate, its engine rumbling low like a waiting beast. Doors slammed, tires spit gravel, and within seconds they vanished down the road. My breath came heavy, heart hammering against my ribs. Rex stood guard at the property line, hackles raised, his growl fading into steady vigilance. The man he'd dropped had scrambled up and run, leaving behind whatever had fallen. I approached slowly, shotgun still ready, until the object gleamed under the floodlight. A wallet. Leather scuffed, fallen open to reveal a driver's license. Marcus Webb, it read. But what chilled me wasn't the name. It was the folded slip of paper tucked behind a credit card, a bank transfer receipt. The sender, Greenfield HOA. Clarissa Doyle. The name rolled through my mind like thunder. She'd been knocking on doors for months, clipboard and hand-polished smile, promising community standards and property protection. I'd told her no each time. My farm wasn't a subdivision. I didn't need a board of busybodies telling me how to raise cattle or paint a barn. But now it was clear she wasn't just asking anymore, she was sending muscle. The calf's labored breathing pulled me back to the present. I knelt by its side, Rex circling protectively, and pressed a rag against the wound. Not deep, thank God, but it would need care. My hands were slick with blood, my anger burning hotter with every heartbeat. They had hurt one of mine, and for that there would be no forgiveness. As dawn crept over the horizon, the full extent of the destruction showed itself. Splintered posts, twisted hinges, panicked cattle, still skittish and pressed close. I called the vet, filed a police report, documented every detail. But one thing gnawed at me: why strike at night so crudely if the goal was simply to pressure me? It wasn't random, it was staged intimidation. And then, as I measured the posts for replacement, a car purred up the drive. Sleek white BMW. Out stepped Clarissa Doyle, all polished blonde hair, navy blazer heels, sharp enough to pierce gravel. She carried a leather briefcase and folder thick with documents. Her smile was smooth, but her eyes swept over the ruined gate without a flicker of surprise. Like she'd expected it. Like she'd ordered it. "Such a shame about your accident last night," she called out, voice syrupy and cutting all at once. "Terrible thing for a hard-working farmer. But perhaps this is the right time to discuss joining our association. For your own protection." My fists clenched around the tape measure. Protection. The word tasted like poison. Standing there in the morning light with my gate in ruins and my calf limping in the field, I realized this wasn't about community or property values. This was war, and Clarissa Doyle had just declared it. Clarissa's heels clicked against the gravel like a metronome of arrogance. She carried herself with the unshakable confidence of someone who believed every battle had already been won. Her smile was tight professional, but I saw the flicker of satisfaction behind it when her eyes grazed over the destroyed gate and the injured calf. She wasn't surprised. She wasn't horrified. She was pleased. Rex let out a deep growl, his body pressed against my leg teeth, bared just enough to warn her not to come any closer. Clarissa paused, adjusted her blazer, and produced a neatly bound contract from her leather case. She held it like it was a gift from a queen to a peasant. "Mr. Carter," she said smoothly, using my name with a practiced sweetness, "I couldn't help but hear about your unfortunate incident last night. These kinds of things happen when there isn't proper oversight. You've resisted joining our community, but clearly you can see the benefits now. Security, protection, value for your property. This contract could solve all your problems." I set down the tape measure and stared at her. The morning air was sharp, smelling faintly of iron from the blood I'd cleaned off my hands. The audacity of this woman standing on my land after what happened, pretending to offer salvation, it was almost enough to make me laugh. "Funny timing," I said flatly, "almost like you knew it was going to happen." Her expression didn't falter, though. The smile stiffened. She handed me the folder papers, crisp and new. I flipped it open, scanning the first page. HOA Greenfield Membership Agreement. The clauses hit me like hammer blows: mandatory dues of $350 a month, mandatory compliance with HOA, exterior standards, and buried deeper restrictions on agricultural operations. By page 12, my stomach turned. Exclusive distribution rights. Every ounce of milk, every pound of cheese or butter I produced would have to be funneled through HOA-approved vendors. They weren't just after dues, they wanted my livelihood. My cows, my barn, even the color of my tractor would be theirs to control. I shut the folder and shoved it back into her hands. "Why not just take my barn keys while you're at it?" Her smile stretched wider, shark-like. "You misunderstand. This isn't theft, Mr. Carter. It's community regulation. Your neighbors who've joined have already seen their property values increase by 20%. Those who refuse, well, it's difficult for outsiders to maintain relationships with local vendors. You'd hate for your milk contracts to evaporate, wouldn't you?" The threat was paper-thin, but heavy enough to feel real. I thought of my calf limping near the fence of my customers in town, who whispered over coffee at the diner of how fast rumors could kill a man's reputation in a rural community. "You're standing in front of my broken gate, threatening me with paperwork while my animals bleed," I said, voice low. "Don't think for a second I don't see what this island—" Her eyes narrowed, though her voice remained polished. "Refuse if you must. But accidents have a way of repeating themselves, Mr. Carter. And next time, it might not just be a calf that suffers." I stepped forward, Rex, matching my pace. "Get off my land." For the first time, I saw her mask slip, just a flash of irritation, almost rage, before she composed herself again. She slid the contract back into her case and turned toward her BMW. "Think carefully, Mr. Carter," she said, her voice floating over her shoulder. "Some fights are bigger than one man." The car door slammed, the engine purred, and she rolled down the drive as if she hadn't just declared war. When the dust settled, I stood staring at the mangled gate, the calf limping in the field, and Rex pressed against my side like a shadow. Every instinct told me this wasn't over. Clarissa had tested me, pushed me to the edge, and when I refused to bend, she showed me what came next. That night, the weight of her words gnawed at me. I sat at the kitchen table, shotgun propped against the wall, the contract spread before me under the yellow glow of the lamp. I read it again, slower this time, each clause more sinister than the last. There was no protection here, only control. If I signed, I'd be handing my farm, my freedom, and my legacy to Clarissa Doyle and her cabal of clipboard tyrants. Rex lay at my feet, restless ears twitching at every creak of the old farmhouse. My coffee had gone cold long before I realized I'd been staring at the same line for 15 minutes. Exclusive distribution rights. My father's voice echoed in my head. A man's land is his life. Don't ever sign it away. I tore the contract in half and fed it to the wood stove, watching the flames devour each page until nothing remained but ash. But burning paper doesn't end a war. It only declares you've chosen your side. The following morning, as the sun crept over the fields, I found a note shoved into my mailbox. The handwriting was hurried, almost frantic. Don't sell your milk tomorrow. It's been poisoned. My hands trembled as I read it. The night before had already been bad enough, but this was something darker. Sabotage. An attack that didn't just threaten my cattle, but my customers, my neighbors, my name. Rex barked from the porch ears pinned forward. My gut twisted as I realized the battle with Clarissa Doyle had escalated. She'd sent muscle, she'd sent contracts, and now she was sending poison. And if I thought last night was bad, I had no idea just how much worse it was going to get. The note sat heavy in my palm, its words etched like a scar across my mind. Don't sell your milk tomorrow. It's been poisoned. Whoever had left it hadn't signed their name, and the handwriting was jagged like it had been scribbled in a rush with one eye over the shoulder. It could have been a lifeline, or it could have been bait. Either way, it meant only one thing. Someone was already 2 steps ahead of me. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the farmhouse made me flinch. Rex paced the floorboards, nails clicking like a metronome of tension, his instincts mirroring mine. When dawn finally broke, I had a decision to make: panic or investigate. And if there was one thing my father had taught me, it was that fear only hands the enemy what they want. So I chose to fight. Before the milk truck arrived, I collected samples from 3 separate tanks, sealed them in sterile jars, and set them aside to deliver to the County Agricultural Extension Office. If there was poison, I'd have proof. But as I secured the lids, I heard the rumble of engines outside more than one. Through the kitchen window, I watched a convoy roll up my drive. 5 vehicles, SUVs, a pickup, even a sedan, polished like it had rolled straight off a dealership lot. They parked in formation, blocking my exit. Doors opened and a group of about 15 people emerged. Some I recognized, neighbors who'd already caved to Clarissa Doyle's HOA. Others were strangers. All of them had the same look, self-righteous authority. And there she was, stepping out of the lead car, clipboard in hand, dressed sharp in a gray suit with a pearl brooch catching the morning sun. Clarissa Doyle looked like a politician campaigning for sainthood. Her smile radiated calm, but her eyes hunted for weakness. "Mr. Carter," she called out loud enough for the whole farm to hear, "we're here for a community health assessment. Given recent concerns, we must ensure your dairy operations are safe." Health assessment? I hadn't heard of any official notice. My gut told me this wasn't sanctioned by anyone but her. But before I could reply, she was already directing her people into my barn like she owned it. Rex growled and stuck close to me as I followed them in. The barn smelled of hay and warm animals, usually comforting. But today, under their scrutiny, it felt like a courtroom. The inspectors spread out, some pretending to examine equipment, others taking photos of nothing in particular. One man pointed at my milking machines with a frown, though it was clear he had no idea what he was looking at. Then I noticed her. A woman near the feed storage, lingering in the shadows, fumbling with something small in her hands. When our eyes met, she stiffened, shoved the object into her purse, and quickly moved away. My pulse spiked. Before I could confront her, a cry ripped through the barn. It was Bessie, my healthiest cow, the one that never gave me trouble. She staggered, foam bubbling at her mouth, moaning in distress. Panic jolted me. She'd been fine less than an hour ago. I dropped to my knees, trying to steady her head, my hands shaking. "Easy, girl. Easy." Her pulse was erratic, her breathing labored. And then Clarissa's voice cut across the barn like a blade. "Oh my goodness," she gasped, holding her phone high, snapping photos of the scene. "Everyone step back. This animal is clearly suffering from a health crisis." Her followers pulled out their phones, whispering, filming the narrative, already spinning out of control. I tried to call the vet, but Clarissa's shrill voice drowned me out. "This facility is unsafe. Effective immediately, I declare it unfit for public access." On whose authority? I snapped, rising to my feet. "You can't just barge in here and shut down my farm," her lips curled into a predator's smile. "Authority of the community, Mr. Carter. And the community will know soon enough that your dairy is dangerous." By the time her convoy pulled out, clouds of dust trailing behind, Bessie's symptoms had mysteriously faded. When the vet finally arrived, he found nothing wrong. Could have been an allergic reaction, he muttered, baffled. But I knew better. That episode had been staged, triggered, and Clarissa had made sure there were plenty of witnesses. The fallout was swift and brutal. By noon, calls from customers poured in one after another, canceling orders. The grocery store manager left a voicemail voice, strained with forced regret. "Sorry, Tom, but we can't risk public health concerns. We'll suspend our contract until this is cleared." Suspended. Just like that, years of trust evaporated. I sat in the barn that evening, the herd grazing quietly in the fading light, the weight of betrayal crushing me. Neighbors I'd known for decades now convinced my cows were diseased. Customers who once praised my milk, now whispering that I was running a plague farm. That night I went back into the barn to check the stalls, and there, half buried under hay, I found a small glass vial. Residue clung to the rim, white and crystalline. My stomach turned cold. That woman hadn't just been snooping, she'd poisoned my feed. I held the vial up to the light rage boiling. This wasn't intimidation anymore. This was warfare. They'd hurt my animals, ruined my name, and nearly sabotaged the entire community's food supply, all to force me into compliance. As I stood there, Rex growling low at the shadows outside, I realized two things. First, this fight was no longer about me alone. It was about exposing the rot Clarissa Doyle was spreading. Second, she wasn't finished. Tonight was just another move in her game, and I would have to be ready when she played her next card. Morning arrived, gray and heavy, the kind of light that makes every shadow look longer than it should. My herd grazed uneasily, their ears twitching at the faintest noise. They felt it too, the tension that had seeped into the soil itself. I poured myself a cup of coffee, but it tasted like ashes. By the time I reached the end of the driveway to fetch the newspaper, I already knew something else was wrong. The gateposts I had propped upright after the attack now leaned again, not from the wind, but from deliberate tampering. Fresh tire tracks carved grooves into the mud beside them. Someone had been back. And this time, they had left nothing obvious to find just the eerie reminder that I was being watched. When the mail carrier arrived, he handed me a thin envelope. No return address, no markings except my name scrawled across the front. Inside was a single sheet of paper: "Your cows are diseased. Sell now before it's too late." The letters were cut from a magazine ransom note style. I crushed the paper in my fist, my blood boiling. That afternoon, the first of the calls came in. A long-time customer, Mrs. Halpern, voice trembling. "Tom, I've heard things. People saying your milk isn't safe. I can't risk buying this week." I tried to explain, but she hung up. Minutes later, another call, then another. By sunset, nearly every contract I'd relied on was suspended. The poison wasn't in my milk, it was in the rumors Clarissa spread like wildfire. I knew I had to get ahead of it. Proof was the only weapon that could cut through her lies. I packed the vial I'd found into a sealed bag and drove into town, heading for the county extension office. Rex rode shotgun ears, pricked his presence, grounding me. But when I arrived, the office was closed. A sign taped to the door read, "Closed, due to emergency inspection duties." I didn't buy it. I pressed my forehead to the glass, staring at the dark interior, wondering how far Clarissa's influence reached. On the way home, I passed the diner. Through the window, I saw familiar faces turn toward me, their conversations falling silent. A few waved hesitantly, but most averted their eyes. I wasn't just under attack, I was being erased. By the time I pulled back into the driveway, dusk was falling. Rex jumped from the truck and sprinted toward the barn, barking furiously. My heart leapt into my throat as I grabbed the shotgun from behind the seat and followed. Inside the barn, the smell hit me, first sharp chemical out of place. My flashlight beam swept across the stalls until it landed on the feed bins. The lids had been pried open. A white powder dusted the top layer of grain like frost. My chest tightened. Someone had tried again to poison my herd. I slammed the lids shut and pulled Rex back, his teeth, bared ready to tear into anyone hiding in the shadows. But the barn was empty. Whoever had done it was long gone. I scooped a sample of the tainted feed into another jar, sealing it tight. Now I had two pieces of evidence, the vial and the feed. Enough to prove sabotage if I could get it to someone who still believed in justice. The next morning, Sheriff Robert Hayes drove up in his cruiser. A big man with a weathered face, Hayes had seen his share of trouble in this county, but when I told him what had happened, he grew uncharacteristically quiet. "Clarissa's been filing complaints," he admitted, flipping open his notebook. "Says you're operating unsafe facilities, not meeting community standards. Yesterday, she even submitted an affidavit claiming you're endangering public health." I shoved the jar of poisoned feed into his hands. Does this look like an unsafe facility to you? Someone is trying to kill my herd, Sheriff, and I'll bet my last dollar it traces back to Doyle. Hayes turned the jar over, his jaw tightening. I'll have the lab run tests, he said finally. But you need to understand Doyle has friends, on the council in the county board. If this gets political, I snapped. Sheriff, this is sabotage. It's a crime, he sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I know, and I believe you. But proving it won't be easy. Rex barked, suddenly bolting out of the barn toward the pasture. Hayes and I followed at a jog. When we reached the fence line, we froze. 4 men stood on the other side, cameras in hand, prodding my cows with sticks to rile them up. Another scattered more of that same white powder near the trough. They were staging a scene, creating footage to make my farm look like a diseased operation. Rex tore across the field, his roar echoing. The men panicked, dropping equipment as they scrambled. One tripped his camera, smashing into the mud. Hayes was already on his radio, calling for backup. By the time we reached them, 2 had fled into the woods, but the others stood frozen, caught by the authority in Hayes's voice. He demanded their IDs. They had none. Their excuses crumbled under questioning. And when I picked up the ruined camera, I found its memory card intact. Flipping through the images, my stomach turned. Dozens of photos twisted the truth my cows made to look sick, the powder staged to resemble contamination. It was propaganda, plain and simple. Hayes studied the screen, his eyes hardening. This isn't just harassment. This is organized. For the first time since the nightmare began, I saw a flicker of resolve in the sheriff's eyes. He bagged the evidence and ordered the men off my property. But as their truck peeled away, I noticed fresh tire tracks in the opposite direction, bigger, heavier. Someone else had been watching from the tree line, recording the entire confrontation. That night, as I sat at the kitchen table, the pieces clicked into place. Clarissa wasn't acting alone. She had resources, money, and a network skilled in deception, and she wouldn't stop until I either signed her contract or she buried me under a mountain of lies. I stared at the jar of poisoned feed under the lamplight, my reflection warped in the glass. This wasn't just about cows or contracts anymore. It was about survival, mine and the community's. And if Clarissa Doyle wanted a war, she had just found out she'd chosen the wrong man to start it with. The town meeting was scheduled for 7 o'clock sharp, but by 6:30, the parking lot outside the municipal hall was already packed. Pickup trucks, sedans, even a few shiny SUVs lined both sides of Main Street. It wasn't just a meeting anymore, it was a showdown. Word had spread fast, and everyone in Greenfield wanted to see blood. Whether it would be mine or Clarissa Doyle's was still up for grabs. I walked into the hall with Rex at my side. His nails clicked against the linoleum floor, his ears pricked, his body tense, like he could feel the hostility before I did. Conversations hushed as I entered. Some neighbors looked away ashamed, while others glared openly. It didn't take long to realize how far Clarissa's poison had spread. At the front of the room, Clarissa sat like a queen presiding over her court. Clipboard in front of her hair pulled tight white blouse crisp, as if she had ironed it just minutes ago. To her right stood a man in a navy blazer, his leather portfolio gleaming under the fluorescent lights. She introduced him with the smooth cadence of a practiced politician. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mr. Thompson from the Community Health Assessment Board," she announced. "He has reviewed preliminary findings on the Carter farm, and I think you'll find his results concerning." The man adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and launched into a speech that sounded like it had been rehearsed a dozen times. He spoke of pathogens, vectors, contamination risks, throwing around enough technical jargon to sound official but never naming a single specific disease. The audience murmured, some nodding, others frowning in confusion. I felt the blood rush to my face. "What pathogens exactly?" I demanded, standing up. "Name them. Show us the reports. I want specifics." The room fell into silence. Thompson faltered, glancing at Clarissa for reassurance. "Well, the preliminary assessments." That's when a voice rang out from the middle rows. Emily Carter, my neighbor, 2 farms over, stood with her phone raised high. "I think folks should see this first." She tapped her screen, and a shaky video filled the projector. The footage was grainy, but the images were clear enough, men scattering white powder near my troughs, whispering about timing and making sure the cameras catch it right. Gasps rippled through the hall. Emily lowered her phone. I didn't know what I was looking at until now. But those men weren't county officials, they were saboteurs. The room erupted into arguments. Half the crowd turned toward Clarissa with suspicion. The other half clung to her every word. Clarissa shot to her feet, voice rising above the din. This footage is out of context. Maintenance often requires materials that can look suspicious, but her voice had lost its silky veneer. Anger cracked through sharp and shrill. She jabbed a finger at me. This man is a danger to our community. His negligence already endangered livestock and people. If he refuses to accept standards, then we will expose him for what he truly is. Even her own supporters flinched at her tone. The mask of professionalism had slipped, and what remained was raw aggression. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Farmers demanded to see real reports. Townsfolk shouted accusations at one another, and Thompson quietly packed his portfolio, slipping toward the door like a rat abandoning a sinking ship. I stood in the back, my fists clenched, feeling both vindicated and furious. Emily's video had given me a lifeline, but Clarissa's venom still carried weight. She stormed across the floor, stopping just inches from me. Her voice dropped to a whisper only I could hear. "You think you've won something tonight. You've signed your own death warrant." Her words were colder than any winter wind, and I believed her. The next morning, horror greeted me in the pasture. 37 cows stood quietly in the mist, their ears bare. Every single identification tag had been cut clean away with surgical precision. Without tags, my herd was legally worthless. No buyer, no dairy, no co-op would touch untagged cattle. In one night, Clarissa had stripped me not just of reputation, but of commerce itself. The milk truck arrived right on schedule. The driver, a friend for years, froze when he saw the missing tags. "Tom, I can't take this," he said softly, clipboard shaking in his hand. "No tags means no legal sale. You know the rules." His truck rolled away empty, and the silence that followed felt like a guillotine blade suspended over my head. By noon, the phone was ringing nonstop. Neighbors asked if I was hiding diseased cattle. Whispers painted me as a criminal, someone trying to sell livestock illegally. My herd wasn't just unprofitable, they were turning into a liability. That evening, as I sat at the kitchen table, staring at a half-written letter to the auction house, Rex began barking near the equipment shed. I followed his growls and found him pawing at a pile of feed sacks. Beneath them, hidden in the dirt, was a canvas bag bulging with something metallic. I unzipped it and froze. Inside were dozens of ear tags, my ear tags, every one of them cleanly cut, numbered, and intact. They hadn't been destroyed. They'd been taken and hidden, like trophies or evidence. I held one up, the plastic glinting in the fading light, my anger rising like a tide. This wasn't vandalism. This was a campaign. Professional, coordinated, funded. Someone with veterinary tools had done this. Someone who knew exactly how to cripple a farm without laying a hand on the animals themselves. As I turned the tags over in my hand, I realized Clarissa hadn't just been threatening me. She was dismantling me piece by piece. Reputation contracts, identification, legality, every support beam of my life pulled out until the whole structure would collapse. And in that moment, I swore aloud, the words hot on my tongue. "You want a war, Clarissa Doyle, you've got one." The bag of ear tags sat on my kitchen table like a smoking gun. Each one bore the numbers I knew by heart, the identifiers that separated my herd from any other in the county. To see them piled together, stolen from the ears of my cattle, was like staring at the severed proof of my livelihood. My coffee went cold beside it as I replayed the last week in my head. Smashed gates, poisoned feed, staged inspections, now this. Clarissa Doyle wasn't just threatening anymore. She was dismantling me with surgical precision. I knew I couldn't fight her alone. So for the first time in years, I scrolled through my old contacts list and dialed Jake Morrison. We'd gone to college together before life pulled us in different directions, me into farming, him into investigative journalism. I hadn't spoken to him in nearly 5 years, but when he answered, his voice carried the same energy I remembered. "Tom Carter, holy hell, it's been ages. What's going on?" I laid it out for him. Every detail. The thugs at my gate, the poisoned feed, the staged cow illness, the stolen tags. By the time I finished, his tone had shifted from friendly surprise to professional focus. "This isn't an HOA dispute," Jake said. "This is organized extortion. You're looking at a playbook I've seen before, manufactured crises, fake documents, staged evidence. Tom, this isn't about you. It's bigger." The weight in his words sank deep. Bigger. My farm was just one piece of a pattern. "I'll be there this weekend," Jake promised. "Get me names, documents, anything. We'll blow this open." When I hung up for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. But that hope was short-lived. At midnight, Rex bolted upright, teeth bared, growling low. Headlights swept across the front porch. Heavy footsteps crunched against the gravel. I grabbed the shotgun from beside the door and peered through the window. Clarissa Doyle stood there, dressed like she was walking into a courtroom, navy coat, heels sharp against the wood porch. And she wasn't alone. 4 men spread out behind her, bulky, scarred, their eyes cold. They weren't neighbors, they weren't inspectors, they were muscle. She held a folder high like a weapon. "Mr. Carter," she called, her voice loud and sharp, "I have a court order for immediate inspection of your property due to ongoing agricultural violations." I kept the chain lock fastened and spoke through the crack. "Court orders don't come at midnight, Clarissa, and they sure as hell don't come with hired goons." Her smile was thin, venomous. "Then maybe you should let us in and we'll explain." The men began circling, one testing the windows, another stepping off the porch toward the barn. My finger tightened on the trigger. "You're done here," I barked. That's when Rex lunged. I opened the door just enough and he shot forward like a missile, clamping down on one thug's arm. The man screamed, blood dark against the porch light. The others froze, suddenly less sure about their paychecks. I stepped out shotgun, raised the night air sharp in my lungs. "Next shot goes lower," I warned, my voice echoing across the yard. For a moment no one moved. Then sirens wailed in the distance, cutting through the tension like lightning. Sheriff Hayes's cruiser appeared, lights flashing, followed by 2 more patrol cars. Relief washed over me, but I didn't lower the gun. "Not yet." Miss Doyle, Hayes barked as he strode forward, his badge gleaming in the beams. "Step away from the property and hand over those documents." Clarissa's mask of confidence cracked as she thrust the folder toward him. The sheriff flipped through the pages under his flashlight. His frown deepened. "These are fraudulent. Wrong format, wrong signatures, procedures that don't exist. You're done." The men exchanged nervous glances as deputies cuffed them one by one. Clarissa screamed at them to resist, but none did. Rex stood panting at my side, eyes still locked on the thug he'd taken down. Hayes turned to me. "Tom, you were right all along. This isn't just intimidation. This is fraud, organized, deliberate. And it goes higher than Doyle." As he read Clarissa her rights, she twisted back to glare at me, hatred burning in her eyes. "You think this ends it," she hissed. "I still have people you haven't met yet." Her voice cracked, more desperate than threatening. For the first time I saw fear in her, and fear meant weakness. Jake arrived the next morning, his camera slung over his shoulder, his notebook already open. He interviewed neighbors, photographed the forged papers, documented the sabotage. "Tom, this isn't just a local scandal," he said, eyes blazing with conviction. "This is interstate fraud. I've already found similar complaints in 3 other counties, all tied to HOA fronts." As he spoke, federal agents arrived, summoned by Hayes after confirming the fake court order. They swept through Clarissa's BMW, her briefcase, her files. What they uncovered left even me stunned. Dozens of contracts, bank transfers, and shell company documents, all pointing to a network of extortion operating across multiple states. By sundown, Clarissa Doyle wasn't just facing HOA complaints. She was facing federal charges. The nightmare wasn't over yet, but for the first time I believed justice had teeth. My farm still bore scars, my herd shaken, my reputation bruised, but the fight had turned. Clarissa thought she could bleed me dry with contracts and poison. Instead, she'd given me the rope to hang her empire. The morning after Clarissa's arrest, the town buzzed like a disturbed beehive. For weeks, she had strutted through Greenfield with the untouchable confidence of someone who believed the law bent to her will. Now she was sitting in a county cell, her empire crumbling in real time. But victory didn't feel clean. Rumors still swirled, and my farm was still reeling from the damage she'd orchestrated. Jake was up before dawn, typing furiously at my kitchen table, drafting the story that would soon hit the presses. "This isn't just HOA drama," he muttered between keystrokes. "This is racketeering dressed up as neighborhood regulation." He showed me photos he'd pulled from Clarissa's seized laptop, memos outlining staged inspections, payment logs to hired muscle, even scripts for fake health board officials. It was worse than I thought. But in Greenfield, perception mattered more than documents. And perception was still against me. My neighbors had seen staged videos of my cows foaming at the mouth. They'd watched Clarissa point her polished finger at me and accuse me of endangering the community. They weren't going to flip sides just because she was in cuffs. That evening, the town council convened in the same hall where Clarissa had nearly turned the crowd against me. This time, the chairs filled even faster. Tension crackled in the air, the kind of electric anticipation before a storm. I took a seat in the back with Rex curled at my feet, his steady presence grounding me. When the gavel struck, Councilman Avery cleared his throat. "We have serious allegations of fraud tied to the Greenfield HOA," he began. "Federal investigators have confirmed forged documents, staged inspections, and evidence tampering." Murmurs rippled through the room. Some Fatsis turned pale. Others hardened with anger, not at Clarissa, but still at me. Old grudges die slow. Then Emily Carter stood up again, phone in hand. Before anyone makes up their mind, you need to see this. She projected new footage she'd captured just days earlier, men scattering white powder near my troughs, laughing about how the sheriff will eat this up. This time the audio was clear. There was no mistaking intent. Gasps filled the hall. Farmers who had once glared at me now whispered to one another, eyes narrowing at the realization they'd been duped. But not everyone was convinced. A man in the front row shouted, "So what if Doyle's crooked Carter still runs a farm that could ruin us if it's unsafe?" The tension exploded into shouts, accusations flying back and forth, neighbors splitting into factions before my eyes. I stood raising my voice above the din. "You've all known me my whole life. 3 generations of Carters have farmed this land. Do you think I'd poison my own cows, risk my own family's name? Everything Clarissa did was a setup and you fell for it. But now you've seen the truth." The room quieted though. Doubt still lingered in some eyes. And then the doors opened. Federal agents strode in badges gleaming, carrying boxes of files seized from Clarissa's office. One agent addressed the crowd. "This operation has targeted communities across 6 states. Greenfield is not alone. We have records, victims, and evidence proving this was never about safety, it was about control and extortion." The weight of those words crushed the last of Clarissa's defenders. Heads bowed, whispers turned to apologies. For the first time, I saw cracks in the wall of suspicion that had been built against me. But Clarissa wasn't finished. She stood at the back, flanked by deputies, but permitted to speak under legal counsel. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup faded, but her eyes still burned with venom. "You fools," she spat, her voice carrying even without a microphone. "Do you really think this ends with me? There are others more powerful, more ruthless. You'll beg for the protection I offered when they come knocking." Her outburst backfired. Even her former supporters recoiled. The council adjourned in chaos, but I knew one thing. Clarissa had just shown her true face, and it wasn't the face of a leader. It was the face of a tyrant exposed. That night, the sheriff stopped by my farm. He carried a folder thick with affidavits. "We've got enough to bury her and her associates for a long time," he said, laying the papers on my table. "But Tom, this doesn't end tomorrow. There are others in the network. You need to stay sharp." As he spoke, Rex barked sharply at the window. Fresh tire tracks led from the tree line toward the road, wide and heavy, too heavy for a casual passerby. Someone had been watching. Again, I clenched my fists. Clarissa might have been caught, but her shadow still lingered. And I knew the war wasn't finished, not until every last piece of her corrupt empire was torn out by the roots. The night ended with me standing at the fence line, shotguns slung over my shoulder, watching my herd graze under the pale moonlight. Their new ear tags glinted faintly in the silver glow. They were safe for now. But in my gut, I knew this was just the eye of the storm. Dawn broke clear and cold, a deceptive kind of morning that whispered peace while promising trouble. The federal agents had spent the night combing through Clarissa's files, hauling out boxes of contracts, bank receipts, and forged documents. Trucks rolled out of Greenfield with evidence piled high, but I knew better than to mistake their departure for closure. Clarissa's venom had spread wider than our county lines, and cutting off the head didn't mean the body wouldn't thrash. I fed the herd just after sunrise, running my hand along the flank of Bessie, the same cow they had tried to poison weeks earlier. Her breath puffed warm against my palm, steady and calm. To me, that was victory. She was alive, grazing, still mine. But the phone calls started before I could finish my coffee. The grocery co-op wanted to renegotiate terms. The feed supplier hesitated to extend my usual line of credit. Even the bank manager called, hinting that given recent instability, my loan might need reevaluation. Clarissa was in custody, but the aftershocks of her campaign rattled every support beam in my life. Jake sat across from me, flipping through his notes with the sharp focus of a man who smelled blood in the water. "This is systemic," he said, tapping a page. "They've been running variations of this scam in multiple states. HOA boards as fronts, fake inspectors, staged crises. It's all the same pattern. Clarissa's just one cog in a bigger machine." Sheriff Hayes dropped by just before noon, hat in hand, the lines on his face deeper than usual. He leaned on the porch rail as Rex sniffed around his boots. "Tom," he said, "I've been in this business 30 years and I've never seen anything like this. Clarissa's already singing to the feds, but her testimony's a bargaining chip. She's naming names, pointing fingers. Some of them, folks higher up than you'd expect." His words chilled me more than the November air. If Clarissa cut a deal, she might drag down her own people, sure, but she might also paint me as an instigator to save herself. That night, the community gathered for what was meant to be a reconciliation dinner. Emily Carter had organized it, calling it a chance to heal. Long tables were laid out at the community center, loaded with casseroles, pies, and home-baked bread. Families came hesitant at first, then in greater numbers. Kids ran between the chairs, laughter finally filling a space that had been choked with suspicion. I stood at the edge of it all, uncertain whether I belonged. Then Mrs. Halpern, the same neighbor who had cut ties with me at Clarissa's, urging approached with tears in her eyes. "Tom, I'm sorry," she whispered. "We should have trusted you. We should have seen through her lies." Her apology cracked something inside me. For weeks I'd carried the weight of betrayal, but hearing those words began to lighten the load. Jake snapped photos documenting not sabotage this time, but resilience. "This is the story people need to read," he murmured. "Not just how she tried to break you, but how the town refused to stay broken." But the night didn't end on warmth alone. As families packed up, I noticed a black SUV idling at the far edge of the lot. Its windows were tinted, its engine running low. When I stepped toward it, the driver pulled away slow, deliberate, as if to remind me, "We're still here." Sleep was impossible. I sat on the porch with Rex's shotgun across my lap, staring at the tree line. My mind replayed Clarissa's last words before the deputies hauled her off. "You haven't met the others yet." By morning, the news broke. Federal prosecutors announced charges against Clarissa and a dozen associates tied to HOA fraud rings spanning 6 states. The damage exceeded $3 million. Families had lost homes, farms, entire livelihoods. My story, documented by Jake, became the thread that tied it all together. Reporters descended on Greenfield cameras, flashing headlines, screaming about the HOA queenpin and the farmer who fought back. For the first time in months, I felt the tide turn. Contracts were reinstated, the co-op offered credit again, even the grocery manager called with a personal apology. My neighbors returned one by one, bringing casseroles, fence posts, and helping hands. Greenfield, once divided, was stitching itself back together. But the scars remain. Some nights I still wake to the sound of phantom engines in the drive or Rex barking at shadows only he can sense. Clarissa may be locked up, but her threat still lingers like smoke after a fire. As I stand at the repaired gate, the herd grazing quietly in the distance, I know one truth as clear as the dawn light spreading across the pasture: this fight was never just about me. It was about every family who refuses to be bullied into submission, every farmer who won't sign away their legacy, every neighbor who chooses truth over fear. And if the next other Clarissa warned me about ever shows up, they'll learn the same lesson she did: this land isn't just soil. It's blood, sweat, history, and defiance. And I'll protect it until my last breath. What happened on my farm taught me a lesson I'll never forget. Bullies thrive when communities stay silent, but they crumble when people stand together. Clarissa tried to break me with fear, lies, and sabotage. For a while it felt like she succeeded. But in the end, it wasn't just my shotgun or Rex's teeth that brought her down. It was the truth, evidence, and the courage of neighbors who finally stood up and said, "Enough." If you take anything from my story, let it be this: protect what's yours, but also protect each other. Speak out when something feels wrong. Help your neighbor even when doubt clouds your judgment. Because justice only wins when good people refuse to bow. If you've ever faced something like this, or if you believe in standing against bullies, no matter how powerful they seem, drop a comment below. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. Our community is stronger when we share these battles together.